Greenwood Cemetery was an old and desolate place located on the outskirts of the village. The villagers were always afraid of it, especially at night. Rotten graves and faded memories buried in the dirt beneath old trees made the place eerie. Celia, a young girl from the village, had always heard tales from the elders about the cemetery, but to her they felt more like myths than reality. She had always been fascinated by supernatural stories, but never found the courage to visit the cemetery herself. One day, however, her friend Ernesto challenged her to spend a night inside Greenwood Cemetery. It was a new and thrilling challenge for Celia, yet her heart was filled with fear. "You know, Celia," Ernesto said, "people in the village say there are creatures in Greenwood Cemetery that hunt the living at night." Celia laughed and replied, "These are just stories, Ernesto. Nothing will happen." But Ernesto smiled and said, "If you really want to know if it's true, you'll have to spend a night there." Celia thought for a moment and decided to accept the challenge. Though her heart was pounding, she was determined to face her fear. Celia and Ernesto reached the cemetery and quietly moved towards its gate. The moonlight cast a faint glow over the tombstones, and the silence was so deep that even their breathing echoed. "Celia, are you ready?" Ernesto asked. "Yes, but I feel like there's something here we shouldn't see," Celia replied nervously. They entered the cemetery. The old graves, broken nameplates, and sorrowful memories buried in the earth stirred unease in Celia's heart. They sat under a decaying tree, lost in the deep silence of the graveyard. After sitting quietly for a while, Celia suddenly felt like someone had stepped behind them. She slowly turned to look, but nothing was there. Her heartbeat quickened. "Did you hear something?" she asked Ernesto. He shook his head. "No, I didn't hear anything." She looked around again, but saw nothing. Trying to calm herself, she whispered, "It's just our imagination." But her heart remained restless. How it all started. Suddenly, a strange sound came from one of the old graves, like a tree branch breaking. Both Celia and Ernesto's hearts skipped a beat. Celia slowly pointed her torchlight toward the source of the sound, but saw nothing. "We shouldn't stay here," she said, her fear now clearly visible. Ernesto stood up and agreed. "Yes, maybe it's time to leave." As they began to walk back, another terrifying sound came from a different part of the cemetery. It was a whisper, like someone calling them. Celia froze, her eyes wide with terror. They looked toward the direction of the sound, and suddenly a horrifying creature appeared in front of them. It looked almost human, but its skin was covered in dirt and dried blood. Its eyes were glowing red, and its voice echoed like a chilling whisper. "Why have you come here?" the creature asked. Shaking, Celia and Ernesto stepped back, but the creature stood in their path. The ground beneath them felt like it was opening, as if something ancient had awakened. "We were just leaving. Please let us go," Celia pleaded. The creature smiled wickedly. "This village is mine, and now you can't leave." Celia and Ernesto gathered all their courage and ran. As they reached the cemetery gate, the creature vanished. Behind them, they heard eerie sounds. But the moment they crossed the cemetery boundary, everything went silent. They returned to the village, shaken. Celia told the villagers about her terrifying experience. The elders said the creature had been haunting Greenwood Cemetery for decades, hunting anyone who dared enter its domain. That night became a horrifying truth for Celia. She never returned to Greenwood Cemetery again. From that day on, fear had a new meaning in her life, and peace never truly returned to her heart. St. Elizabeth Cemetery stood on the outskirts of a quiet American village, abandoned, ancient, and shrouded in centuries of mystery. Known among the villagers as the Graveyard of Souls, the cemetery had long been a source of fear and dark folklore. Thick vines crawled over time-worn headstones, and twisted trees loomed like ancient sentinels over crumbling graves. The air around the cemetery was always still, too still, like the world held its breath around this haunted ground. The cemetery was said to be hundreds of years old. Locals told stories passed down through generations, stories of ghostly apparitions, strange groans at night, and the sound of dragging chains. Some swore they saw shadowy figures roaming among the tombstones after midnight, and a few even claimed the dead walked here on Halloween night. Jacob, a bold and skeptical young man, always laughed off these stories. He believed in logic and facts, not fairy tales. But something inside him had always been curious about the truth. So when Halloween night came around and the village was locked behind closed doors with people either hiding or partying, Jacob saw an opportunity. "Let's finally find out what's real," he told his best friend Edward, who was hesitant but loyal. After some convincing, Edward agreed. That evening, as the moonlight bathed the earth in a ghostly glow, the two set out toward the cemetery with flashlights, backpacks, and brave faces hiding their unease. As they approached the iron gates of St. Elizabeth Cemetery, an unnatural silence wrapped around them like a cold blanket. The wind was still. Even the insects seemed to avoid this place. Jacob paused, staring at the rusted gates. "Do you feel that?" he asked softly. Edward nodded, his face pale. "Something's off. We shouldn't go in." But Jacob pushed forward. "We've come this far." With a creak that echoed into the darkness, they opened the gate and stepped inside. The descent into terror. A gust of icy wind brushed past them the moment they entered, as if the cemetery itself had exhaled. The trees creaked above them, and the air smelled of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. As they walked deeper, the headstones grew older and more eroded. Some bore names so faded they were unreadable. Edward stuck close to Jacob, constantly turning his head at every noise. A snapping twig, a fluttering leaf, the crunch of their own footsteps. "I don't like this," Edward whispered. "Let's leave. We've proven our point." Jacob shook his head. "Not yet. I want to see if there's something more. Something behind these stories." They reached the heart of the cemetery where an enormous ancient gravestone stood. Unlike the others, this one was carved with symbols neither of them could recognize. The name was gone, but it felt alive, as though it had witnessed centuries of darkness. Jacob stepped closer and ran his fingers over the carvings. "This grave is different." Edward grabbed his arm. "Jacob, please, let's go. This grave, it's not right." But Jacob was lost in curiosity. He knelt down and brushed away the leaves. As he touched one of the symbols, a sudden sound pierced the silence. A low, grinding groan, like a door opening underground. From the grave, a dense, shadowy mist began to rise, swirling like smoke in the moonlight. It took form, first formless and dark, then slowly twisting into something humanoid. It had a face but no eyes, just deep, glowing red sockets. Its body hovered above the tombstone, crackling with a sound like tearing fabric and whispering wind. Edward gasped and stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" Jacob couldn't speak. His voice was stuck in his throat. The creature stared at them, or at least it felt like it did. It began to move, slow, steady, floating closer. "Run!" Jacob finally shouted. They turned and sprinted toward the gate. But before they could reach it, the heavy iron doors slammed shut with a deafening clang. Locked. They were trapped. The creature was getting closer. It didn't run. It didn't need to. Its presence was paralyzing. The very ground beneath them felt like it pulsed with each of its movements. "We need to find another way out," Jacob yelled. They darted between the gravestones, their flashlights flickering. The fog was thick now, unnatural, pressing in from all sides. Whispering voices seemed to come from the ground, soft, pleading voices. "Jacob, help! Let me out!" Edward clutched his ears. "Do you hear them? It's like they're inside my head." Jacob saw a broken chapel in the distance, half collapsed, overgrown with ivy. "There! Maybe there's another gate!" They rushed inside, slamming the door behind them. The chapel smelled of mildew and death. Dust swirled in the air. In the center was an altar covered in old bones and rotted cloth. A large mirror stood behind it, cracked from top to bottom. Edward backed away. "This place is worse than outside." Suddenly, the mirror shimmered. They turned. In the mirror, they saw not their own reflections, but the creature, standing right behind them. They spun around. Nothing. Back to the mirror. The creature was closer, and then it stepped through the mirror. Jacob grabbed a heavy candle stand and swung it with all his strength, striking the creature's shoulder. It recoiled, letting out a shriek that rattled the glass windows. "Go! Now!" They burst out of the chapel and sprinted back toward the main gate. The fog seemed alive now, twisting hands, shapes, reaching for them. Shadows danced just out of reach. Jacob remembered something the old shopkeeper once said. The dead don't want peace, they want company. Was this what he meant? As they reached the gates, Jacob noticed something, a small carving on one of the nearby graves, the same symbol from the ancient tomb. It was glowing faintly. He ran to it, placed his hand on it, and shouted, "Open the gate!" The ground shook. The fog screamed. The gate slowly began to creak open. The creature howled, furious, monstrous. Edward and Jacob didn't wait. They sprinted through the opening, hearts pounding, lungs burning. As soon as they crossed the boundary, the gate slammed shut behind them. Silence. They collapsed on the ground outside, trembling and covered in dirt. The night was still. The stars returned. The fog vanished. When they returned to the village, their faces pale and eyes wide, the townspeople gathered around them. No one spoke for a while. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. Jacob and Edward never returned to St. Elizabeth's Cemetery. They didn't need to. They had seen what lurked in the darkness. But months later, strange things began happening in the village. Livestock vanished. People reported hearing cries in the wind. Some claimed to see a shadowy figure watching from the woods. Jacob would lie awake at night, haunted by what he had seen. The worst part? That night, it never really ended. And somewhere in the shadows of St. Elizabeth's Cemetery, the creature is still waiting. In a small village in the Philippines, where silence would fall as soon as the sun dipped behind the trees, the local chief assigned me, Jose, as the night guard for an old cemetery. I needed money badly, so I didn't ask too many questions. The cemetery sat at the edge of the village, hidden behind thick woods where even sunlight struggled to reach. On my first night, I took a flashlight, a radio, and some basic gear. The cemetery gate was rusted and creaked with the slightest wind. As I stepped inside, a strange chill swept over me. The graves were ancient, some headstones so worn the names had vanished. Everything was still, unnaturally still, like time had stopped inside those boundaries. The first few nights were relatively calm, but strange things happened. One night I saw what looked like mist rising from a grave, and a figure sitting by it. As I approached, it disappeared. Another night, I heard footsteps behind me, but no one was there. I shared all this with Ricky, my childhood friend. He laughed and said, "It's all in your head. It's a cemetery. Trees, wind, and shadows can play tricks on you." But I wasn't convinced. On the fourth night, something happened that still haunts me. I was at my usual spot when I heard soft crying from the far end of the cemetery. It was a woman's voice, faint, desperate, pleading. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the sound. Nothing. Just a single old grave with freshly disturbed soil. That night I couldn't sleep. At sunrise I went straight to Ricky. Seeing the fear on my face for the first time, he turned serious. We sat at the local market when an old man joined us. He had overheard our conversation. He said, "A woman is buried in that cemetery. She committed suicide. Her husband used to beat her, and when she died, the villagers believed her soul never found peace. Several night guards have heard her cries. Some even lost their minds." Ricky turned pale and whispered, "So, what now?" I decided I wouldn't give in to fear. The next night I returned to my post. But this time, Ricky came with me. We brought extra lights and set them up around the graveyard. By 2 a.m., all the lights suddenly went out at once. Darkness swallowed the entire cemetery. Ricky said, "This isn't possible. The batteries are new." Then we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crushing the damp leaves. We lit our flashlights and searched around, but saw nothing. Then a shadow drifted past us. Ricky grabbed my arm tightly. "Did you see that?" We tried to leave, but the gate had shut on its own. No matter how hard we pushed, it wouldn't budge. And then, a grave in the distance began to move. The soil shifted. Our blood froze. A hand emerged, covered in dirt, long fingers, blackened nails. We backed away, horrified. Ricky dropped his flashlight and bent to pick it up. That's when he saw her. The woman. Her eyes were white. Her hair was wild, and she was moving toward us. I grabbed Ricky's hand and we ran. Somehow the gate opened just as we reached it. We didn't look back. That was Ricky's last visit to the cemetery. He swore never to return. But for me, it didn't end there. Every night when I tried to sleep, her face haunted me. The hand, the cries. I kept dreaming I was inside that grave, and someone outside was shining a flashlight at me. A voice echoed, "Jose, you disturbed my peace. Now you will never know peace." I woke up screaming, soaked in sweat. Ricky took me to a local spiritual healer who gave me some prayers. I eventually quit the job, but my mind never escaped. Years have passed, yet I still fear the dark. That shadow, that voice, that touch, they never truly left me.